Telling the truth is treasonous, now that lies rules the world. Nonetheless, those who know must teach African proverb. I sincerely believe in a people's ability to rise above any and all situations when given the proper information about their plight and condition. Our core problem as Black people is that far too many of us are clueless of the hidden social sciences that are being systematically deployed against us for maintaining white social dominance over Black people. Social science is one of the branches of science devoted to the study of human behavior, specifically how people interact with each other, behave, and develop as a society. It's used to steer society toward the objectives of the ruling class, which logically includes maintaining their position of dominance as well. As earlier stated, our core problem as Black people is that far too many of us are clueless of the hidden social sciences that are being systematically deployed for maintaining white social dominance over Black people. Here are the 3 hidden social science reasons why the white society refused to teach true Black history. The reason why they won't teach true Black history is much more nefarious and self-serving of the white society than most Black people fully understand. The first reason is because teaching it would contradict the premise that is necessary for maintaining white social dominance over Black people. The white society cannot teach that long before the Europeans invaded Africa, it was Africans that civilized Europe and still maintain their dominance. Because according to white social scientists, in order for a dominant group to maintain its position of social dominance, the history taught within the society must endorse the dominant group's position of social dominance. Therefore, the history taught within a society must always exalt the dominant group. This conveys a subliminal message that the dominant group is inherently superior and is therefore supposed to rule over its subordinate populations. The second reason why the white society won't teach true Black history is because white social scientists also theorizes that a people's future is predestined by the history they're taught to believe about themselves. According to their theory, an inspiring past is required to achieve an inspiring future, because people references their future capabilities based upon their past achievements. More specifically, people references their past positive information about their particular group to acquire a positive self-image that inspires their future. Therefore, to give their racial group a type of history that bolsters their collective self-esteem and that inspires their future aspirations, white social scientists, white historians, and white propagandists whitewash history to make their racial group appear more significant throughout history than they truly in fact were. This fact is greatly witnessed by how they depict Africa's ancient Egyptians. For although Egypt is located in Africa, and all of its pyramids and the Great Sphinx were built by Africans thousands of years long before the arrival of the Greeks and the Arabs during the 7th century, the white society nonetheless falsely claims that the ancient Egyptians of Africa were ridiculously Europeans. The fact is that all scientific evidence proves that Africa's ancient Egyptians were accordingly Africans. The geographical location of Egypt is Africa. Radiocarbon date testings have scientifically proven that the ancient kingdom was built by Africans thousands of years long before the arrival of the first Arabs and Europeans during the 7th century. Hair sample testings, melanin concentrated skin testings, bone density testings, and DNA genetics testings have also scientifically proved that the Africa's ancient Egyptians were in fact Africans. Their DNA matches current-day sub-Saharan Africans. More specifically, their DNA testings prove that they belong to the human Y chromosome group E1B1A. This is the Y chromosome group of sub-Saharan Africans who currently speak the Niger-Congo languages. These results were published in the DNA Tribes Digest of February 2013. The white society deliberately ignores all of these scientific findings that prove that the ancient Egyptians were in fact Africans, and instead falsely depicts them as having been Europeans, because the history we've been taught has been whitewashed for the benefit of the white society. White historians deliberately stolen Africa's glorious history of Egypt and falsely portrays it as being theirs to inspire their racial group. More specifically, they've removed their history from their uninspiring ancient cave-dwelling origins of the Caucasus Mountains of Europe, and falsely placed themselves upon the inspiring thrones of Africa's ancient Egypt. In doing so, they've literally made our past greatness appear as being theirs, and they made their marginalized past appear as being ours. They then uses their position of power to impose that false whitewashed version of our history upon society as being factual. The white and black masses are functioning based upon these false versions of history to the benefit of Caucasian and to the detriment of Africans. According to social scientists, truth is not important to inspire a people's future. What's only important is what's perceived as true, because people function based upon their perception of what's true rather than what actually is true. This scenario is what's meant when white social scientist says that those who control the past also control the future. The past has been whitewashed for the future of the white society. Don't be confused by the modern Arab Egyptians that are not, they are merely descendants of Arabs who whitened the population after the 7th century. The fact is that when the pyramids and the Sphinx were built, there were only Africans living in Egypt, then called Kemet, aka Land of the Blacks. The Greeks called them burnt faces. White historians have deliberately stolen Africa's glorious history of Egypt and falsely portrays it as being theirs to inspire the future aspirations of their racial group. Moreover, they also cannot admit that Africans built the pyramids while Caucasians were still living in caves of Europe because they refused the myth of white racial superiority over black people. For oppressors to maintain their social dominance over the oppressed, they must propagate the myth that the oppressors are superior to the oppressed. The white society sits upon a throne of white exalting lies. The nefarious whitewashing practice is called Orwellian propaganda. Orwellian propaganda are societal conditions created and sustained by misinformation, distortion of fact, denial of truth, and the manipulation of the past to falsely exalt Caucasians while falsely marginalizing we Africans. White historians justify an ethical practice by saying that it's customary for conquerors to distort facts and rewrite history to favor themselves. However, the true reason it's being done is because it provides them with a historical platform that endorses their position of social dominance, and it creates and sustains false assumptions within society that aids them in maintaining their social dominance over black people. The nefarious practice also includes falsely giving white people credit for most inventions made by black people. Case in point, the white society miseducates us by teaching us that Thomas Edison is responsible for lighting up the world. However, the true facts are that after Thomas Edison patented his light bulbs, no companies purchased it nor mass produced it. This is because it was deemed not efficient enough. It lit very dimly and only lasted a few minutes. The inventor whose light bulb was purchased, mass produced, and spread throughout the world was invented by an African American named Lewis Latimer. He sold the patent to the U.S. Electric Company in 1881. He was also dispatched around the world to oversee its installation. Therefore, the hidden truth is that, in fact, it was a black man that lit up the world. Lewis Latimer lit up the world. Latimer literally wrote the book on electric lighting and also holds the patent for the first electric lamp. He's also the man that drew up patent schematics designed for Graham's Bell telephone. The history book of the white society are filled with white discrepancies, intentionally falsely giving white people credit for inventions that were in fact made by black people. As a result of this fact, the majority of the masses now function based upon their perceptions that most inventions that have revolutionized the world were invented by Caucasians. The reality and the facts are the exact opposite. After slavery was abolished in the U.S. in 1865, Following it between the years of 1870 to 1940, African Americans submitted 726 invention patents to the U.S. Patent Office. This was not only extraordinary, so closely following slavery, while still dealing with the unresolved traumas of slavery and still being wrought by the injustice of white racism, but even more so because those numbers more than doubled those submitted by whites during the same time frame. This scenario of black people outpacing whites and making inventions has never changed. It's merely concealed from the public through the white society's monopoly over information. The hidden truth is that in spite of cultural traumas wrought by the injustice of white racism and slavery, most inventions that have revolutionized the world were either in fact invented by black people or were directly inspired by early inventions by black people. This is the hidden reality. Without black people, there would exist no internet, no cell phones. We wouldn't have cameras or microphones on our cell phones. We wouldn't have the accurate weather forecasting system. We wouldn't have the cataract laser removal scope. We wouldn't have emails. We wouldn't have GPS, hearing aids. There'd be no touch-tone phones, no caller ID, no home surveillance security systems, no motorized vehicles, no steam engines, no traffic lights, no working light bulbs, no elevators. Therefore, no skyscrapers, no air conditioning, no modern PC, no 3D movies, no central heatings, no refrigerators, no helicopters, no washing machine, no lawnmowers, no dryers, no refrigerated trucks, no blood banks, no fiber optics, no nanotechnology, no female sanitary pad, no bathroom tissue holders, no pencil shop, etc., etc. Black people have, in fact, enriched nearly every aspect of the lives of every person on this planet through our many inventions. Your perception is a white deception. The oppressor's depiction of the oppressed is never a true one. It's always negatively distorted to serve the oppressor's nefarious agendas against the oppressed. This has remained a consistent fact throughout history and is especially still true now in regard to black people living under white dominance. White social science determined that if the reality became known that most revolutionizing inventions were coming from the minds of black people, that this would eventually erode the perception of white racial superiority that's required for maintaining white social dominance over blacks. Therefore, to prevent this erosion, they deployed a perception management system that makes it appear that most revolutionizing inventions are coming from Caucasians while making it appear as making black people appear as being the leeches of society that haven't invented much throughout history. Perception management is a propaganda technique that involves altering the public perception of reality to suit the objective of the dominant culture. It is an essential part of modern information warfare. Through this nefarious scheme, the collective self-image and self-esteem of Caucasians have been falsely bolstered at the expense of those of black people. The truth of the matter is that white people invented the patent office and have always used it to steal the intellectual property rights from black people. It's what the system's made up. Because in order for black inventors to get their inventions mass produced, they have to go before white companies. These white companies acquire the right to these inventions, and then they place white faces in front of the technologies. This scenario literally allows the white society to continue exploiting the intellectual genius of black people while maintaining the empowering perception that most inventions are coming from the minds of whites. As I stated earlier, truth is not important. What's only important is what's perceived as true for shaping society towards an applied objective. Therefore, creating the perception that most revolutionizing inventions are coming from the minds of white people, when they're coming in fact from black people, greatly aids the white society at maintaining their social dominance over black people. Now here's the third and final social science reason why the white society won't teach true black history within our schools. Education is much more than a matter of developing students' cognitive ability and math, language, science. It is a process of imparting information, knowledge, and values which best enables students to realize their highest potential. Studies shows that how children behave is greatly influenced by what they're taught to believe about themselves. Therefore, it is extremely important that children be taught of the many contributions made by their particular group. Students can then reference these messages about their particular group to acquire their self-image and assess their potential and capabilities in relation to the information. Therefore, an educational setting that properly nurtures the aspiration and potential of a child is one that includes the many contributions made by the child's particular group. This is a basic human need, and it is the basis that children use as a point of references for their potential. It is particularly important for children living under difficult circumstances to know about and be able to identify with members of their group who can help them feel good about being members of the same group. This basic human need is being deliberately withheld from Black students during their educational development. The white educational system's failure to adequately provide Black students with a racially affirming curriculum, as it so routinely does so for white students, is actually a social science tactic that's essential for maintaining white dominance. Because for a ruling class to maintain its position of social dominance over its oppressed population, they must condition the oppressed from a very early age to accept their subordinate status and adhere to the authority of the dominant culture. To do so, the education given to the oppressed from a time that their minds are young and most impressionable must be the type that denies them of a racially affirming curriculum. When the oppressed population is denied of a racially affirming curriculum, even the brightest among them may have little, if any, hope of mentally extracting themselves from their feelings of inferiority within a society dominated by the other culture. This is our hidden reality. They keep our minds distracted by myths, fairy tales, urban legends, crazy premises, so we don't understand what's really being done to us. Because they know in order for a people to liberate themselves, they must gain a true, clear, and accurate understanding of their plight and condition. Because if our understanding remains flawed, then all liberating remedies that stem from this understanding will also be flawed. Black people, open your eyes and see the reality. Open your eyes and see the reality. Elevate your mind above a biblical fairy tale and silly urban myths. Lift your mind up. You must elevate our minds. Elevate in order to be liberated. We have to elevate to liberate. Please wake up. One love and peace.